managed to find this wiper mechanism in a box. I can't get it to work at the moment, so I don't know whether it's serviceable or not, but what I'll do is pull it apart and just check everything inside. If it looks like it is serviceable, I'll clean it up. Clean the plastic, of course, repaint this, clean the alloy, re-grease the mechanism, and I've got some isolation mounts on order, not the originals, but I should be able to make up a new mounting plate. So I'm hoping that when I pull this apart it is still in a working condition, so I just need to pull it apart, clean it up and go from there. Now, the wiper motor didn't work when I tried it, but I pulled the end cap off, removed the armature, cleaned the contacts, the brass contacts on the armature. They weren't damaged in any way, but I cleaned them off, and the brushes were okay, reassembled it, and the motor now works. Just polished the end cap up a bit to make it look a little bit less faded, so that's okay. Put a couple of new installation pieces on there because the other ones, these ones here, were actually falling apart. Painted up the centre. Re-greased the internals, so they're okay, and it works fine. As for the mounts, I bought these on the internet. They're not made for this, but they're about the right size and they adapted to the plate, so they'll actually provide a good mounting point. So I'll put that on the car now. Now, my aim was to try and fit an electric sender in lieu of the alcohol-based temperature gauge. Reason being, I actually didn't have the alcohol-based one. It was broken. Now, I've purchased a modern gauge. Obviously it's in centigrade, not Fahrenheit. Pulled it apart and then fitted the electric sender underneath. Now, slightly different dimensions. It was deeper, so I've actually had to cut the base of this to recess it in. A lot of fiddling around to line it up. The indicator was originally white on the end. Well, that was easy enough to spray. The temperature range is very similar, and once I was able to get the mechanism to fit, which is the hardest bit, then it took a while to actually align the gauge, make sure it fits reasonably neatly within the opening that's provided in the housing. And it's a little bit difficult to get in. Just make sure that's roughly lined up with the hole, and that's the way it ends up. Can you tell the difference? If you look hard, you can tell that the end of the needle doesn't have an arrowhead on it. But other than that, I mean, if it's sitting in the dash, you would hardly know the difference. And certainly, being an electric sender, it'll be a lot easier to actually run it through the firewall and into the front of the motor. So I'm quite happy with the result. Now that's should be an operational gauge. I've now just got to work on getting the right sender for the petrol gauge. But all in all, that's worked out well. Now I've checked the fuel gauge. The fuel gauge actually does work, but the sander doesn't. Now, I didn't think I had a sander, but I managed to find two in the boxes of bits and pieces. Neither works, or neither did work when I tested them. Now, what I've done is I've pulled them apart. Here's the two here. I'll pull them apart. This one here seems to be complete. This one here is missing a contact on the end. I might have dropped it off when I pulled it apart in the garage. I'll have to have a look for that, but apart from that, that one's a little bit stiff. This one actually moves freely, but it wasn't working. Now, the way they work is a resistance strip in here, and as the fuel level goes up or down, this little contact here, you can see it moves around, and it's on the face of the contact there is meant to brush against that winding there, the resistance winding. Now I'm going to clean it up and see if I can get it to work. I'm hoping I can. Everything seems to be intact. The resistance winding seems to be okay from what I can see. Everything's a bit dirty. I just need to clean things up. I may need to adjust that. The contact there seems to be a little bit bent the wrong way. And I'll certainly clean all this up. Once I've done that, I'll see if I can get it to work. You can get generic replacements. I'm not too sure whether you can get the original Daimler one, but I know you can get generic replacements. The fittings might be different onto the tank, so that's the configuration of the screw holes. If you're looking for a replacement, you need to know the resistance rating, and I've measured that. That's actually 34 ohms. Now it is the way this works. When the tank is full, the resistance to earth from this point is 34 ohms. When the tank empties, it's probably close enough to zero to not even worry about it. If you check the gauge on the dashboard, you'll find that if you apply voltage direct to it, it will go to a full position. So you need to connect it to the resistance here to actually change the way that reads. But so yes, when it's up, it's 34 ohms. When it's down, it's 0. So if you're looking for a replacement, that's really what you need to know, apart from the dimensions. So I'll clean this up and see if I can get it to work. Hopefully I can. It seems alright. If I do, well, that's one less part to purchase and one original part back in the vehicle. Okay, I've cleaned up the terminals. I've just temporarily connected up the gauge. You might be able to see this on the gauge. As I move the sensor, up it comes to full, and then down it comes to near enough to empty. That will actually drop down when I mount it vertically and clean up a little bit more. So this now works, and all it was is cleaning up the contacts. I'll just disconnect this a bit so I can show what I'm doing. As I said, I just got it temporarily hooked up just to make sure it was working. Now that bolt doesn't go in there. In fact, what needs to go back in here are 3 brass rivets, and they actually hold the 2 parts of the housing together. Now I don't have those at the moment, they're on order, but when I get that I'll actually rivet these back in place. The reason it's not quite reading right is that it's not aligned properly. I need to, it's a little bit out when I just bolted that up. What the problem was is obviously the brush inside was a bit dirty. I've cleaned that up. Down on the bottom here, this shaft needs to earth. Now the way they do that is to put this spring in here, which needs to be stretched a little bit more than it is. It's a little bit loose. It presses on a metal plate down the bottom here, which just happens to be brass. This little piece here, just see that there? That's a brass plate which locks into the housing down the bottom there, and this on the bottom here is solid brass. So when this spring pushes that loose brass washer in effect against this, it makes earthing contact. So that needed to be cleaned up. I can probably still clean it a little bit more, which I'll do. But once that's cleaned up and a little bit more tension put on the spring, this is now a working unit. So I'll just clean it up, replace the cork, that damaged one there, and it will go back in the car. So just save the problem of trying to find a generic brand to fit. So the original one will go back in.